Hi, thank you for suggesting video submission as an alternative to a 2 or 3 page written document for the final assignment of Anti-Discrimination 2021. There's no way I could have gotten all of my comments onto 2 pages. In fact, I'll be reading from about 6 pages of notes relative to the sample handbook that I used from SHRM. I'll open by citing a 2015 SHRM article titled Top 10 Mistakes to Avoid with Employee Handbooks. And ironically, the article was published in the same year that the sample handbook was published, which suggests that either the article came out after the handbook or the people who wrote the sample handbook hadn't read that article yet. Anyway, the article says a poorly written handbook can create confusion, which this sample handbook does in some cases, especially as it relates to discrimination policies and the potential to misinterpret or become confused by them if you are a reader of this handbook. So in the context of this assignment, quote, poorly written boils down to style, clarity, consistency, organization, with just a touch of what might be inaccurate or incomplete information. And so I'm going to address some of these issues before honing in on some of the specific policies that could be cleared up as well. In fact, they're mentioned in EEO, ADA, ADAA, and so on is a good thing. But are they mentioned well? Of course, that's addressed by quite a few CYA type statements, so they don't really have to be good. But I'll get into that too a little bit further. So let's just start out with specific policies and recommendations I make by sharing 8 concerns about style in organizations. I take the style and organization approach because when handbook topics are well organized and written in an easy to follow, neutral, consistent style, the policies and the laws that influence/govern them become more clear, thus more accessible, more relevant, and useful to readers. Not only employee readers, but also, perhaps people that might have to defend an employer at some future time. So the observations are, 1, communication style generally is overly gendered and sometimes falls into a sort of awkward possessive tense rather than consistently conveying a neutral tone. And this is a challenge because difficulty with gendered language, i.e. husband, wife, son, daughter, he/she, his/hers, and so on could enhance opportunity for claiming that the organization's leadership clearly has a sex-based bias that is so pervasive, sex-based or gender-based bias that is so pervasive that even the handbook is discriminatory. It certainly appears to anticipate that all employees will fit a limited set of pronouns and personal relationship-based titles that potentially impacts employee benefits. A sense of inclusion and equity throughout the organization is missing when it comes to gender or sex. B, the possessive tense here. It might be okay if our and we, words like that, were used consistently and they were reflective of the culture of the organization, but this possessive tense is used inconsistently, which suggests that maybe as sections of this document are updated, the tone and style are not carried throughout the document. Thus, consistency is not valued in the organization. It's just not relevant. And the awkward possessiveness is most challenging in the progressive discipline section that begins on page 10. In this context of discipline, it sends an us, meaning us organization, versus you employee kind of tone. And I'll say more about that progressive discipline section multiple times in my presentation. It's just really poorly written. Okay, 2, next observation. Lack of an organizational cultural statement. How the heck does that fit in with the laws? Well, setting out the organization's beliefs, mission, and traditions establishes expectations for workplace-connected relationships. Having no such statement suggests pretty much a free-for-all or wild, wild west interpretation of the terms that this handbook uses, many of which are not well defined. For example, terms that are not defined at all are bias and prejudice. Harassment is defined, but it's not well defined. While harassment is defined, I reiterate, the definition is weak. And then a lack of an organizational cultural statement leads to a lack of context for the employer to use as a defense in a discrimination claim. So, yeah, it applies to the laws, if indirectly. Okay, the third observation is a lack of dispute or conflict resolution policy for mitigating the impact of what may begin as a normal misunderstanding between employees or boss-employee relationships. Oh my gosh, so many potential harassment cases could be avoided if there was a mitigating procedure for communication involved in the workplace. So instead of having a conflict resolution policy, there's a poorly written progressive discipline section suggesting a lack of understanding about and a complete lack of leadership skill with conflict management basics. They just don't understand it. Worse, it leaves the employee who may be experiencing harassment or bullying to resolve it themselves. There is a lack of a clear path in this discipline process. Also, I can't find where the EEO policies were adequately explained so that if, the timeliness, that's it, the timeliness of contacting EEO is not mentioned anywhere in this progressive discipline process. The fourth observation is lack of definition or description of key terms such as bias, prejudice, and harassment. I already mentioned, for example, page 5, what's the difference between bias and prejudice? It's never outlined. And how would that impact your employment relationship with XYZ, if at all, or simply just awareness? Observation 5, incomplete inaccurate listing of protected classes. For example, sex is missing altogether. Rather, the use of the word gender appears to have taken its place. So the omission of the word sex and replacement with the word gender suggests that the author has no idea, none, that gender is a social construct while sex is a biological thing. And that omission and replacement can easily be construed to mean the employer has no genuine interest in matters of sex or gender-based bias, prejudice, harassment, bullying, or possible medical and benefit needs. At the very least, the language of the ADA and ADAAA section when listing protected classes should be copied in verbatim in related employee materials. So the not using the language that is part of Title VII and also ADA, ADAAA could be problematic for the employer. Additional classes appear to have been mentioned here, and those could be state, local laws that have added them, or it could be a company choice. They can always expand the classes, but these foundational protected classes should be referenced properly, accurately. Okay, so observation 6, there's an inconsistent definition of employment terms such as full-time versus part-time. While this is not likely discriminatory in itself, again, this inconsistency could contribute to arguments made regarding workplace misunderstandings and poor top-down communication regarding policies and procedures generally. For example, I think it's page 8 that defines part-time as at least 20 hours and less than full-time, which is described as 37.5 hours. But then on page 27, under the section vacation pay, part-time is defined as 20 to 29 hours, and full-time employees are considered working 30 plus hours. So what is it? Clarify that disconnect there. Observation number 7. There's a need throughout to cross-reference key sections, such as including EAP resources in the section on workplace safety titled Drug-Free Workplace, which is page 13. Page 15, poorly written to suggest the company will help employees, and it casually references that an EAP program exists on page 16, but contact details for EAP resources and how these things work and so on are almost an afterthought, found 23 pages later on the last page of the book. So again, we're not really valuing it. We're going to say we're going to help you, but figure it out on your own. Okay. The 8th observation, as we'll come back to discrimination, and by the way, the EAP thing, how it ties into discrimination, it could come under a disability. So, got to think about that. The forward section and employee acknowledgement form appear straight up after the table of contents. Yo, anybody going to read this thing? No, just sign the form, go away. Again, it suggests that this organization really doesn't care whether or not an employee even reads this document. So therefore, they're sending the message that it's fairly irrelevant. And by the way, we put a bunch of words in here that we can change anytime and do not constitute an agreement, an employment contract, or even a legal document. So if it's not a legal document, why are we requesting you sign that you actually saw the fact that we're saying it's not a legal document and it's totally irrelevant to you as an employee? It just doesn't feel good. You want your handbook to have some meat, some substance? You put the acknowledgement form at the end. Ideally, you make it online so people have to click through the pages. They at least have to scroll and have had the opportunity to read all these beautiful sections, especially the anti-discrimination sections, before they sign off on it. And by placing your forward there, what did I say about the forward? Okay, the forward, basically they both contain a great deal of CYA language so as to diminish the importance of the policies that follow. True. For example, quote, only general information and guidelines are some of the terms used in the forward. Not intended to be comprehensive terms are available in official policies, but it doesn't say where those policies are or if an employee ever has access. So, again, the most glaring thing is the acknowledgement form that says it's neither a contract of employment nor a legal document. I understand it's not a contract of employment, but as soon as you sign something as some sort of agreement, it is a legal document. Well, at least in the mediation world. So, the forward should be placed with that culture statement, organizational culture statement, and all of the CYA language used in the forward should be moved to the last pages, concluding with the employee acknowledgement form, which I would put as this totally separate document. In this way, the employee has to at least scroll through the pages. So, aside from the style and organization, specific policies that appear to be discriminatory here are the page 5 EEO statement. I mentioned that sex is missing as a class and pregnancy should be included. Use of the term gender seems to be intended as a substitute. And another example of poorly written is the closing sentence in the EEO statement where it says, quote, improper interference with the ability of XYZ to perform their expected job duties is absolutely not tolerated. So what? What is improper interference and what the heck is going to happen with tolerate? I mean, this is just empty rhetoric. Page 5, the anti-harassment policy and complaint procedures. It's really kind of missing a procedure at all. It's very loosey-goosey. Again, bias, prejudice need to be defined. There should be either a glossary or a cross-reference to an exhibit, someplace where key terms are defined. Again, sex and pregnancy missing. The tone second guesses employee and suggests the employee who perceives harassment may be delusional. The words used are XYZ encourages reporting of all perceived incidents of discrimination or harassment. They got to delete the word perceived. If somebody feels they're being harassed, they're being harassed. Scrolling to the poorly written complaint process, there really is no process. When the employee is advised to tell the person who harasses them to stop. Are you serious? People deal with harassment in the workplace for long periods of time before they finally get to the place where they might say something. And then when they do, they're told to go back to the person who's essentially been harassing them, possibly for a long time, most likely for a long time. Bullies don't stop. They may change their approach and their method. They may calm down for a little while, but they're going to come back at you. So, and no fixed time period for reporting. Oh, glaring lights. Got to at least mention the EEOC timelines there. And maybe send people to the bulletin boards or the break room or wherever you have those handy little posters posted that give you the contact information for EEOC in your company and so on and so forth. So it's so poorly written that when you scroll back up from that one section, just scroll up a couple of paragraphs. It talks about the individuals in contact covered. It says, it applies to all applicants and employees, whether related to conduct engaged by fellow employees or someone not directly connected to XYZ. Come on. Who is someone? Why would the average someone walking down the street know that the XYZ company is going to hold them accountable for what again? I mean, just totally unclear. So, other terms are used like appropriate disciplinary action. What the heck is that? Okay, so page 7, another area that needs a little help is ADA and the ADAAA section. It's generally well done, but it should include a link for reference to where employees can find more information. Again, back to those posters. On page 9, sections regarding nepotism, employment of relatives, and personal relationships. It should be completely redone in a non-gendered way, or a much better non-gendered way. They define close relatives, father, mother, sister, brother. We can use non-gendered terms. We could say spouse, domestic partner, significant other, parents, grandparents, child or children, extended blood family relatives or relatives of spouse or domestic partner, including in-laws and first or second cousins, however far you want to go. But do a lot better with the lack of gendered titles and pronouns. So, what is particularly strong about the anti-discrimination policies of this handbook? I didn't find the anti-discrimination policies to be strong, unless merely existing is considered strong. But thankfully, SHRM provides suggested updates. I went in and I looked at 2021 recommendations include excellent wording for the anti-discrimination policies and drug testing programs. Yeah, that's going to help the ADA, ADAAA, and benefits for medical disabilities. So, it also includes a paragraph that says in 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court held that, quote, sex, unquote, discrimination under Title VII includes sexual orientation and gender identity. Okay, the sample was written in 2015. Maybe they get a pass. But it does need to be updated. So the drug testing programs updates also, thankfully, include something about marijuana, which, of course, was problematic in this 2015 handbook because it referred to all drugs as if they were drug or prescription. Marijuana can be prescription. It also can be illegal because it's federally illegal. And so this is a tricky area. So they do make recommendations here. So I'm just going to leave that there because we're over time. But thank you so much. This has been a great class. I've really enjoyed it. And it's time to go. And thank you. Bye.